Hi, Bob and Carol. Thank you so much for meeting with me today. A few things before we start to go over the parenting plan. As we go over these often sensitive topics, please remember that you can stop me at any time if you need a break, if you need to ask a question, or if you'd like to move slower throughout the section. Okay? All
Really
right.
appreciate that, Kelly. Thank you so much for your kindness and for the time you've spent with our children. We really appreciate it.
No problem, Carol. So before we get started, it's important to remember to keep your children in mind throughout this entire process. As much as this appears to be for you, we must think about the convenience for the children. So let's begin with parental responsibility. This refers to the time the children will share with each of you. Shared parental responsibility involves you both making equal decisions in your children's lives, such as on matters related to education and healthcare. No parent can make a major decision without the other parent's approval and agreement. The next option is shared parental responsibility with decision making authority. Each of you will agree on important decisions involving the children. However, if you cannot agree, the authority making decision is decided by who you allocate in this parenting plan, with decisions such as non emergency healthcare and education. The last option is sole parental responsibility. And this really isn't used in Florida. However, it means that one parent will have sole responsibility for all matters involving decision making for the children. Do you have any questions?
No question yet. The shared parental responsibility sounds like our best fit right now.
Okay, thank you for sharing, Bob. Carol, does shared parental responsibility work with you as well?
I mean, for me, I just want to have the kids as much as possible. I've spent the last 9 years of my life raising them every single day. I've been involved in all of their decisions around their care, like speaking with their teachers, creating and maintaining routines, setting up play dates, stuff like that. My only concern about shared parental responsibility would be that Bob travels quite a bit for work. I worry about the kind of adjustment he'll need to make in order for him to be actively involved. So
Mhm.
that's my only concern. But, if Bob thinks that he's able to do so, then I'm open to that.
Mhm. I hear your concerns, Carol. And additionally, I'd like to remind you both that if you would like to add a provision in the parenting plan, such as when Bob is out of town, then Carol is given the opportunity to be with the children, or you both agree on hiring a nanny or something of that sort, that can definitely be included in the provision. But we can get to that part later. Okay.
Yeah, I believe a provision like that would be totally appropriate. Either a nanny or Carol could be with the kids when I'm away, but I also do plan to adjust my work schedule so that when I'm with the kids, I have time with them.
Okay, so great. Now there are a few equal time sharing options we can go over, but a few things I'd like you to keep in mind. First, it's important to remember that research states timeshares work best when the children have access to both parents. Additionally, living close to one another is important because if an emergency arises, the children will know each parent is nearby. It's recommended for children their age not to go more than 2 to 2.5 days without seeing the other parent. And research shows that children with both parents involved in their schooling perform better in school. Now, there are a few time sharing splits. There is 50-50, which is equal time share, 60-40, and 70-30. Is there a certain split you would prefer?
Yeah, I would prefer the 50-50 split. As I had just mentioned, I know that some flexibility in my work schedule and also just making sure I'm available when I have the kids is my priority. And with that, I would like to have them at least half the time.
Yeah. I mean, while I obviously have my reservations about that, based on the research you've shared with us, it does sound like for them, that would be best. So can you give us like a little more information kind of on how that might work in a way that's sustainable for both of us?
Of course, there are a few options to choose from. Remember, you can stop me at any time. First, we have the 2-2-3 schedule. Essentially, each of you will have 2 days with your children, followed by 3 days with the person who started the week. For example, one week, Carol, you may be on Mondays and Tuesdays. Bob, you have Wednesday, Thursdays, and then Friday, Saturday, Sunday goes back to Carol. The following week will be the opposite, starting with Bob. The pros of the 2-2-3 are that the children don't go longer than 2.5 days without seeing the other parent, and the schedule works great for parents who live in close proximity. Both parents have equal time, and its consistency is good for the children. The cons may be that it requires scheduling on your behalf, as you will alternate days weekly. So one week you're Monday, Tuesday, but then the next week you're Wednesday, Thursday. However, it is possible to grow accustomed to this schedule. The next option is the 2-2-5-5 schedule. One parent will have 2 days, the other will have 2 days, and then the first parent will have 5 days. The following week, the opposite parent starts for 5 days. The downside of this is that the children will go 5 days without seeing the other parent, which may not be beneficial for the children, as research states. However, the caveat to this may be including one overnight with the other parent during the 5-day streak. Additionally, you can also alternate every week. The pros are that you spend an ample amount of time with your children and you don't need to worry about exchanges. You can also add an overnight midweek so the children can see the other parent. The con is that both of you, the parents and your children, may struggle spending so many days apart. It would also require more consistent updates on your end to keep each other updated on what exactly your children are experiencing, their homework assignments, or any extracurricular activities they're involved in. Lastly, we have the 3-4-4-3 schedule. This includes the children staying with one parent for 3 days of the week, then the other parent for 4 days. The next week it switches. So the first parent has the children for 4 days, and then the other parent has them for 3. The pros are that each parent spends equal time with the children, and there are limited exchanges. However, it will again require you both to communicate much more for the midweek exchange and to keep updates on the children's activities. Do you have any questions or are resonating with one of these options?
Yeah, considering what's most practical for Sam and Sarah, the 2-2-3 just sounds like the best option for them, even with what you've described they need from us going through this process. So the 2-2-3 is what I prefer.
Okay, Carol?
I agree. From the developmental considerations that you've shared, 2-2-3 sounds like it's in the children's best interests. And so obviously I am more than willing to make that work. I know I sound like a broken record, but I do have concerns about Bob's ability and time to really move into this more active parent role. A big point of contention in our marriage was, who was responsible for the children and the home. And I think it's going to be a huge shift for him in terms of, developing routines, packing lunches, checking homeworks, bath time, all of those kinds of things that he's just not habituated to.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'd like to remind you, Carol, that while working with me and engaging throughout this process, you are and will be exposed to parenting skills. And these concerns, if Bob feels the same way, can be addressed and can be worked upon. Okay. So from what I'm hearing, the 2-2-3 schedule sounds most compatible with you both, despite some concerns for Bob's traveling. However, Bob did mention earlier that he is open to becoming more flexible and taking more initiative throughout this process. So let's look at the children's holiday schedule. What traditions do you celebrate?
So, as we've talked about, I am of the Christian faith. I am very closely tied to my faith. So holidays, at least such as Christmas Eve and Christmas, Good Friday, Easter, those really big church holidays, I would love to have my children be able to still participate in those.
Mm-hmm. Carol?
I love the holiday season and I love spending time with my family. And I love the rituals we've developed as a family. I think the issue is that Bob and I have divergent priorities here. I want family time and bonding, and he feels church should be the focus. And that's been one of those big issues in our marriage about, time spent as a family and what that should look like.
But also, to make it clear, I do see church as bonding and family time.
Right. And that's where we don't agree.
Okay, well, we are going to address religious beliefs in another section, but for right now, it sounds like your beliefs are equally very important to you, and there are options to choose from. You can choose to celebrate holidays together yearly, alternate holidays between the both of you yearly. Maybe, Carol, you have a certain holiday on odd years, and Bob, you have another holiday on even years. So any combination is really possible. Are there any holidays that come to mind that you would like to spend the full day with your children?
Father's Day. I still am their father. I would love to have my kids all day Father's Day every year, regardless of even or odd.
Mm-hmm.
That's a good point. I mean, I guess Mother's Day makes a ton of sense. I think selfishly, I would want to spend every holiday all day with my children, but I recognize that it's probably not what's best for them.
This is very possible. So from what I'm hearing, every year on Mother's Day, Carol will have the children, and then every year Father's Day, Bob will have the children, regardless of who actually has them during that day in the week. Yes? Okay. For those long weekends where the children do not have school on Mondays, I'm talking about Labor Day, Memorial Day, Veterans Day. There are a few options to look at. You can have the children follow the regular timeshare schedule. You can pick which Monday holidays you would like. Your children can stay with the parent who had the timeshare the day before, or you could even split the day or the weekends in half. Again, these holidays include President's Day, Martin Luther King Day, and Veterans Day. Do you have any preferences?
I really prefer just consistency. I think that's something that we've discussed a few times so far that Carol and I agree on. We want consistency for our kids. So I think just keeping the same schedule and then just the next parent picking them up when they would have picked them up that day would just be the most consistent plan.
I agree. I would like for this to have as, like the least number of surprises possible, and for everyone to kind of feel comfortable knowing what to expect. So I would say the less we can change, the better.
Okay, great. So what I'm hearing is that the person who has the original timeshare on Monday will spend the day with the children. Yes? Okay. Moving on, children's birthdays can be a very special day, especially given Sam and Sarah's ages. Have you given it some thought?
I know I want to see them. We haven't had that conversation between us. We figured that would be better to have with you, but I want to celebrate my children's birthdays on their birthdays every year.
I think in the immediate future, it'll be challenging for Bob and I to be in the same room for birthdays. I'm hopeful that, as time rolls on, we can take what we've learned and maybe someday we could celebrate birthdays together in some fashion, but or maybe at least, attend like a graduation together or a wedding.
Kelly, I don't know if that's possible though. I don't want to create a plan right now that has us celebrating together.
Oh my God, Bob, let me finish.
I just want to make sure that we're being clear, because I want the kids not to feel the tension. I want the kids to be able to live their best life, and me interacting with you and your mother all in a celebratory setting, I just see that ruining their day.
Okay, Bob, I hear your concerns. Thank you for sharing. Carol, can you please finish what you were going to say?
Well, I was just saying, while I don't think that's possible right now, I would like to see the children as well. But Bob, I just want to make it clear that, I'm trying to extend an olive branch to you here and plant positive seeds for the future. So I would appreciate it if you would acknowledge that.
I do acknowledge that that is what you are attempting to do. I think that your failure to see how that doesn't feel like an olive branch to me right now is where we are miscommunicating.
Okay, well, while I hear both of you throughout this time period, I'd like to remind you that again, we can add a provision to readdress issues such as the children's birthdays at a later time. However, right now, let's focus on their current age range throughout maybe when they turn 13. So let's remain calm and let's remember to keep their best interest in mind. Okay. So after hearing what you're saying, it sounds like both of you would like to see the children on their birthdays. And I was wondering how you would feel about maybe doing a split, such as mom, you can see the children from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. and celebrate with them. And then dad, you can see the children starting from 4 p.m. on to the next morning where the regular timeshare will resume. Then maybe the next year you can alternate the times. So dad, you can have the morning, and then mom, you could have dinner time. How does that sound?
Yeah, thank you, Kelly. I feel I feel like you heard what I was saying. As long as I get to see them on their day, that works great for me.
Okay, what about for you, Carol?
I'm more than willing to try it.
Great. I just want to take a moment to compliment you both on working so collaboratively today. Moving on, we're getting through this. Summer breaks can be very long, and oftentimes we see children and parents wanting to go on vacations. So I'm wondering, have you considered how you want the summer to play out?
Yeah, my theme here is consistency. So how it looked throughout the year, I'm very comfortable if that's also what summer looks like. My bigger concern comes in when there's like a vacation. So if I want to take away the kids, or if Carol wants to take away the kids, I don't want to just be surprised, like, hey, we're leaving, and then what happens? Or our timeshare schedule then does get messed up. It's more about the vacations, but just for the day-to-day of summer, I think the regular schedule would make sense.
Yeah. I mean, I love taking the kids traveling. I think it's so important for young minds to have exposure to new cultures and new experiences. Um, I also know that structure and routine are important to kids. So, I mean, also additionally, financially, I probably wouldn't be able to take them anywhere particularly lavish for right now as I'm getting on my feet. I'm worried that vacations will become a place where Bob is able to kind of use his financial resources to seem like a cooler parent than me. And then the kids will want to spend more time with him during the summer taking vacations.
I do think it's important to bring up, because we have been doing the work meeting to meeting, Carol, and the last thing I want to do is step on you as a parent. So even if we don't get along, I'm not going to take the kids on a lavish vacation and say, look what your mother cannot do for you. That's not what summer vacation is for.
I really appreciate you saying that, Bob. Thank you.
And I really appreciate the transparency from you both and your fears approaching summer. So it is possible to include a provision in the parenting plan that states that each of you may take a week-long vacation with the children during summer break, so that you each have time to spend with them. You don't have to worry about maybe like Bob taking the children to spend the summer in Europe because he's limited to 1 week. And then Carol, you'll have ample time to spend with the children as well in whatever setting you choose to as a vacation. It is possible to include a provision in the parenting plan stating that each of you can take a week-long vacation with the children during summer break, just as long as the other parent is given 2 weeks notice in advance and is provided an itinerary for what is going to happen during the vacation. And this way you can both be assured in what your children are engaging in and be updated daily on what their day looks like.
I like that a lot. I like the 2 week in advance notice. That's good. And the itinerary I think is very smart as well, because obviously we each want to know what our children are up to. I'm kind of concerned, is there like a time frame around the itinerary, or is that like, is there just, I want very clear boundaries in this process right now.
Okay, so if Carol were to take the children on a vacation and you were notified 2 weeks in advance, what time frame would seem appropriate for you to know the itinerary of the trip?
I mean, maybe at least a few days before they leave, maybe 3-4 days before they go, something like that.
Okay, so 3 or 4 days. Carol, what about for you?
That makes sense to me. I think this all feels quite spacious, and we should be able to communicate with each other such that each parent feels comfortable with the vacation being planned.
Alrighty, I'll make sure to include this in the parenting plan. There will be a 2 week notice and at least an itinerary being provided 3 days before the trip. Sound good? Okay. So our last section about holidays are the major ones like Christmas, Thanksgiving, New Year's, and Halloween. How do you both imagine experiencing these days?
The option you had presented earlier about alternating years, I think that might be our easiest option, considering we don't agree on how we want to bring the same values to our children. It might just be better to have our own days to do those things.
Okay, Carol, what do those holidays look like for you?
I mean, given that we came up with this idea of splitting the day on birthdays, I'm also wondering if that could be smart too, so that we both get to spend time with the kids. I hope that we live in close proximity to each other. It seems like that's going to be important as well. I'm just wondering if that would be complicated with mass schedules for you, Bob.
I appreciate you considering mass. They have the morning service and they also have evening service. So if you wanted to split the day, we could make that work. I don't know what your family would have planned though. I feel like that needs to be taken into consideration, as well as they're going to be a Christmas party, and then it becomes a problem as to when I'm going to pick up the kids from the party, because then they're missing out.
Okay. I'm not really sure. I mean, like, could you be flexible around pickup time? Does it really matter, like, when the party's over?
If we're going to mass, absolutely.
Okay. I don't know. I have to think about that because, my family throws a great Christmas party.
Well, what is possible is maybe, Carol, on even years, you have Christmas Eve, and then on even years, Bob, you have Christmas Day. In that way, you could have your parties, Carol, and then Bob, you could have the experience of having Christmas with your children. The next year, it would rotate. Carol, you have Christmas Day. Bob, you have Christmas Eve. How does that sound?
I really like that option.
Okay. I mean,
does that work for you, Carol, or would that be bad?
Yeah. No, I think that truthfully, while selfishly, I would love to see them, like maybe half the day or whatever, in order to avoid arguments around the kinds of points that you raised, Bob. It might just be more clean to do it that way.
What we can also do is include a provision stating that the children can contact you at any time throughout these days to share at least somewhat of an experience with the other parent.
Okay.
Absolutely. I don't even know if that needs to be included as an actual provision, although it can be just for the sake of clarity and boundaries. But the kids would never be prevented from speaking to their mother.
I appreciate that, Bob, and I certainly would never want to create negative energy around the children being able to speak with their father. I think, that's important.
Okay, great. So now that we've got parental responsibility, timeshare, and holidays in agreement, let's consider religious practices. Bob, as you have stated multiple times, you have a close relationship with God and Christianity. And Carol, you have recently discovered Buddhism. How do you each feel about your children practicing these modalities?
Yeah, I don't even really know what that looks like. They've really only ever been exposed to Christianity, as I see that being the right way. And I I don't know, would it be confusing for them? I prefer them to have a Christian relationship and beliefs and have that connection with God, but I also don't want them to be forced into a connection with God. So I don't know, it's very confusing for me now that we're bringing in another option.
Mm, I hear that, Bob. And I just want you to know I want our children to have faith and spirituality. Those things have been important to me in my life. And I do think community that can be found through those avenues is important. For me, I have just found liberation in a different kind of faith than the Christian faith. I found that other kinds of spirituality mesh better with my actual values. And I am concerned about your hesitance to kind of expose the children to additional points of view. And ultimately, I would say my biggest concern is I don't want them to feel coerced, right, into having to make a choice in order to keep Bob happy.
So, what I'm hearing from both of you is that while you would like your children to have some sort of belief in a higher power, you also do not want to force your children to adhere to what you are practicing. Do I have that correct? Okay. So, if you are able to reach an agreement that feels and is fair to you both, what are you hoping will be better in terms of religion and spirituality?
Um, I guess my children or our children will clearly state their beliefs. They have their choice and autonomy in choosing how they are spiritually led. I think that feels fair.
I'm also just hoping that they become more tolerant humans. I think at the end of the day, Bob and I want to raise these children as best that we can. Um, he and I have different relationships with Christianity, and I just think potentially their ability to hold space for multiple points of view will make them better humans. So that's kind of what I feel like is important to me.
So, given what you both have said, it sounds like it would be possible for Sam and Sarah to practice the religious beliefs of the parent they are with. It is important for you, Bob, that religion is not forced upon, rather than it is a decision that will one day they will make. And then for you, Carol, it's important for you that your children experience the essence of a community and having opinions that can be heard and not rejected.
Yeah, absolutely. I want them to have something they believe in.
Okay. So I'm wondering if maybe, let me know if this sits well with you both, including a provision that the children can practice the religious beliefs of the parent they're with. However, those practices cannot interfere with the other parent's timeshare.
Yes.
What does that mean?
Choice of the children.
Well, well, I'm just curious, Bob obviously doesn't majorly respect the things that I'm doing in my new practices. And the children seem to really enjoy meditating when they're with me, for example. So, what if they want to meditate when they're at their dad's house? Is he going to say, this is not allowed because this is a Christian household?
When did you ever read the Bible and see that meditation was not a component of it? If my children want to meditate in the morning, afternoon, or evening, that's beautiful. And that is how they can better their connection. So, no, if that's what my children want to do when they are with me, then that is more than fine. If it is their mother calling in and saying, hey, remember to meditate, that to me is the problem.
I had no idea you were so spacious in your beliefs, Bob.
You've never given me the
Nice
time to show you how spacious I can be because you already have very predetermined thoughts, feelings, and opinions, and that is okay. I respect your thoughts, feelings, and opinions.
So let's take a moment. I'd like to compliment you both on being able to carry out this decision making, as well as it sounds like throughout this process, you are both learning new things about each other. And I think it's important to remain curious, remain respectful, and just remember keeping the children in mind throughout the development of this parenting plan. Okay. Alrighty. So now that we have religion and the provisions settled, given the separation, we must address the potential for new significant others. I know it may be hard to think about, but do you have any concerns, mainly regarding the introduction of new significant others to your children?
Yeah, I feel very strongly that a lot needs to be considered before any significant other is brought into the children's lives. I think that either I or Carol should meet the person before the kids ever do. And I don't think that's something that should be rushed.
Okay, Carol?
This topic feels incredibly charged to me because despite our commitment to transparency in this process, Bob continues to believe that I'm still sleeping with a woman at my yoga studio. So I sort of feel like everything he says is like preemptively punitive. And I feel like if I were to introduce him to a woman who went to my yoga studio, he would say no, just on the principle of the idea that he thinks that I haven't been faithful to him throughout the end of our marriage. So for the record, I'm not with anyone currently. If I were to meet someone, I would like to be able to integrate them into meeting our children at some point. I feel like the only thing we ever seem to agree on is developmental milestone literature. That seems to be what cuts through the noise. So like, is there something we should know specifically about when to introduce significant others to our children?
Great question, Carol. What we do know is that going through divorce can be hard for the children emotionally. They are grieving a loss and the loss of a parent. So, research suggests that it's best not to introduce the children to anyone for 1 year following the divorce.
I think 1 year feels like a fair amount of time.
Wow, I didn't realize that the recommendation is that amount of time, but I can understand this better now that you've explained it from the standpoint of grief and loss. I am curious to know though, if like as time goes on, these changes in partners become less impactful, or whether this is kind of like the rule of thumb always.
I hear your concerns, Carol. It is possible to also include a comment in this section stating that if either of you were to find someone you truly want to introduce the children to, that maybe for Bob's sake, you plan on getting married to, you'll make sure to consult with each other first and have a conversation about introducing this new individual, maybe even the potential of the other parent meeting this individual.
I wonder if there could be some sort of exceptions outside of this idea of marriage. I'm like a little burnt out on the idea of marriage. Obviously, our divorce isn't even finalized yet. And so I just don't want that to be a critical piece in evaluating the depth of my connection with another person.
Okay, so maybe it wouldn't state that you would potentially marry this person. However, it would state that you share genuine feelings for this person and you'd like to share that experience of sharing time with the children and your partner.
That works for Bob. The only issue I have is whether he's going to just be punitive again for the reasons of this like belief in infidelity that he continues to harbor. I don't want to give him the the decision-making power around whether or not the children get to meet my significant other.
Okay, well, let's hear from Bob.
Yeah, I feel like Carol's really made the decision for me that I'm unwilling to meet a new partner when that's not true. So I don't know, I kind of feel that the conversation's not a conducive use of our time right now.
But we have to decide something about significant others, Bob, and introducing them to our children.
As we've said, I would like to meet them first, or you meet them first. It's best for the children to wait up to a year.
But what if you meet the person after a year and you don't like them? Then what are you going to say?
I don't know. what if you don't like the person after a year, Carol?
But that's my point. Like, I don't think either of us should be the sole discretion on who our children get to meet, because obviously we have divergent tastes, or else we'd still be married to each other.
So then
Well,
yes.
1 second. It is important to remember that meeting the other spouse, meeting this person is not the determining factor on whether you can stay with this person as a partner. The only reason I am suggesting this is to share and show some consideration for your partner, not that they will be making an executive decision. Does that make sense?
It does.
I have concerns about it still, but I do see what you're trying to achieve with this idea. But is this only if we're introducing them, want to introduce them to our children before a year has expired, or
Yes,
like
this
a
is
forever
only,
thing?
no, this is before the year.
Okay. Okay. Because I'm wondering about, like, I can understand how a future partner of mine might not want to get lunch with my ex-husband. Like, so, but if it's just within that year period when we want to be especially sensitive to the children, I could see how that
Could you not
makes
see
sense.
how that could potentially be problematic as well if you are with somebody who doesn't have an interest in meeting with your ex-partner or the father of the children that they are joining the life of?
I mean, I think that there's a big difference in, like, being in a room together at a party and sitting down for a lunch of 3.
Okay.
That's just me.
Mhm.
I would be very interested, Bob, to see if the next woman you choose really wants to get lunch with me.
I would only agree to date somebody who had enough wherewithal to want to know the mother of my children. That is
Okay.
something that I can assure you.
I guess we'll find out.
We will.
So from what I'm hearing, in the provisions, we can include maybe a short statement saying that at least the parent will advise the other parent that they are seeing a new significant other. However, they will withhold introducing the children until that year mark. And then you guys can decide if you want to meet the person or introduce them before that year mark, but we won't have that on paper.
Okay.
Okay, Bob?
That works.
Okay. So finally, we want this parenting plan to be as long lasting as possible. However, given the age of your children, there are likely to be some changes made along the way. So for example, once children enter middle school or high school, they're better able to go longer periods of time without seeing the other parent. So I'm wondering if you would like to include a comment stating that you will readdress this parenting plan within the collaborative divorce process at a later time.
Yeah, I think that that would make a lot of sense, especially, we've talked about development, and even in this meeting, we mentioned how reassessing some things when the kids are 13. So I think it's important to note that.
I agree. I feel like we've learned a lot about co-parenting and problem solving inside of this process. I can only speak for myself, but I feel like working with a third party reminds us of our goals. You've been very helpful when things get more heated to bring us back to focusing on the children, which can be hard to do on our own. Although I do think Bob and I have gotten better at it over time. I at least feel that difference in our work together, when we have homework assignments and stuff. So I'm hopeful that we'll just continue to get better at it, but I like the idea of coming back into this process if we need to adjust things and can't do it on our own.
Okay, Bob, do you agree?
I do.
Yes. Okay, so I just want to thank you both for your transparency today, your effort today. It is clear to me that you have worked on yourselves and worked on engaging in this process more collaboratively. I'm going to go ahead and update the parenting plan and send it to the financial professional and the attorneys to overlook some of those more financial issues as well as overnight issues. And then we will circle back.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you so much, Kelly.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Have a good one.